So why do we talk about family systems? Why do we talk about family tree? We know that we're impacted by the people around us, right? We know that we're impacted by our current family, but by the family of origin. But we also know from the current research that exists in generational trauma transference that we are being impacted by the lives that happened before us and the life that being passed on to us. So similar to physical illnesses, when we go to the doctors, there will be part of the history taking will be, does it exist in the family? Did anyone in the family suffer from the same thing? What was the story? How did it end? Because that informs our own situation. And the same applies to everything else in our life. So what people before us went through impacts us. And also we know from the current, from our current situation, from our culture, from our society right now, we have all these ways to process what is happening to us, right? So these days it's very common that it's a common knowledge then when something super traumatic happens, or not super traumatic, on a daily basis, when we go through something, we process it. We find a way to deal with it, we find a way to integrate it, we find a way to let it go. Historically, that was not necessarily the case. So our ancestors had much less space for that, much less information about it, much less opportunities. And a lot of the big feelings would stay unprocessed. And anything that is not integrated is going to be collected and passed on. And this is where we come to this flow of life, the life flow. This is what connects all of us together. This is before we even look at our family system, we look at the life flow. We look at this force that connects everything from the beginning of time to the end of time. And this is one of the first principles of the flow of life, is that it always flows from the past and it always flows into the future. So everything that exists is being passed on. It's a flow. It just happens. And we don't know how we pick up something from that flow. So the flow carries everything. But some of us will pick some stuff and others will pick other stuff from that flow. Or we will be delivered. Maybe we're not picking, but we're just inheriting, we're just giving it. We don't know how it works on a bigger scale. But in our lifetime, we sort of don't have a choice. We are born, and we're born in a particular flow of life, right? All the people that came before us, everything that they lived through is being carried forward, is delivered to us, and then is carried forward into the future. And this flow of life, it's important to know about it, that it's neutral. It's not, it doesn't distinguish between good and bad. It's not moralistic. All it's interested in is for life to keep going. So sometimes we will find why this is important is because sometimes we will find ourselves in situations that are super difficult, and they also create life. And sometimes we find that our life comes out of some incredibly difficult places. And sometimes it's very difficult to admit that. To admit that for us to exist, something horrible had to happen to those before us. So there is a little bit of splitting happening because we really don't want anything bad to happen to anyone. But at the same time, if it didn't happen, we wouldn't be alive. So that becomes a little inner conflict that might grow into something bigger as we live our life. So the important thing is to remember that even in the darkest of places, life will find its way. And sometimes that becomes the price of our own life. So for us to live fully, to step into our life fully, to claim it fully, and to have the freedom to kind of take our place and take the full breath, we have to agree to what happened before us, because that's the price. And agree doesn't mean justify it or that it was right or wrong. It's not about that. It's the inner agreement that things had to be what they were for us to be here and now. And that's sort of the honoring of what happened before. The flow of life is the power, is the force that bonds generations, that creates this connection, and that brings with it the entanglements, the loyalties, and the resources. So this is what allows us to stay connected to the past and to impact the future. So all of that is about impact. All our work around family systems, all our work around the lineages and around the flow of life is about impact. What impact the past has on us? What impact are we going to have on the future? And this is sort of what the summary is about: the impact of the past, the impact onto the future. The thing that the flow of life requires from us is seeing it, acknowledging it, honoring it, and saying thank you. So being grateful for it. When we do those, we are able and free to put it down if we need to. So if we find some entanglements with the past, it's important to see what is the entanglement, who we are entangled with, what was the story there, to acknowledge it. I see you, I honor you. To be grateful for it in a sense of what I mentioned before, that allows us to be who we are. There was some sort of purpose for that entanglement in our life. So for that, we're grateful. And then we're able to either let it go, give it back, put it down, or integrate it in some way so that it serves us rather than blocks us or limits us. And we'll talk about it a bit later. So a lot of the movement in a systemic work, in a constellation, in a family constellation, or in a systemic ritual will be about that, will be about seeing, acknowledging, being grateful, and then maybe letting go or maybe integrating. That's the basic of the movement that happens with the entanglement. And of course, with resources, seeing and claiming is one of the key things. With the power, with the strength and resilience and all the good stuff that the ancestors went through, because that is also passed on to us. With the entanglements and the pain points, we also receive the good stuff, the strength, the power. And one more thing to remember about the flow of life is that it belongs to this physical reality. It belongs to this linear time. So we know that at some point when we zoom out enough, the time does not exist, right? It collapses all into one and the same at the same time. But for us in this physical body, in this lifetime, we belong to this flow that is part of the physical reality. So in this body, in this lifetime, we're talking about the ancestors of this body, of this lifetime, and then their ancestors, and then their ancestors. So it has this quite a linear quality to it. And that's what we mostly attend to when we look at family systems. But of course, we as a combination of this lifetime, this body, and beyond, right? Our soul coming in, all our other incarnations and everything else, we are more than that. But this is a big chunk of who we are right now, right here. with the flow of life, where it comes from, what it brings to us. So what it brings to us, we'll look at the next slide, but where it comes from is the past of our ancestors. So this is our family system and beyond, the lineage. So we have the close ancestors, those whom we know, or those who were in maybe in the last 7 generations. They are closer to us in time. They're closer to us in history. Their potential pain points, their trauma, their suffering will still be quite active in the collective field and in the field of the family. So we are much more likely to create entanglements with the close ancestors. Then we have stuff that is delivered to us by the flow of life from the distant ancestors. And this is beyond 7, beyond 13 generations. And that is mostly a place of resources. So they are withdrawn from us in time enough to for the suffering and for the pain to dissolve enough not to impact us that much. Sometimes that's not the case, but mostly that's the case. And they're willing and able to support us. So they are the places where we go a lot for the resources, which doesn't mean that we don't go for the resources to the close ancestors. We do as well, because also we have sometimes personal connection with them, like our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our great grandmothers. Some of us are lucky to know them well and to have had a good relationship with them. So that will become our strength as well, our support. And then we have the non-blood related ancestors, which are in human form. They are those, especially those who are not blood related, but who have facilitated life in the lineage. So they would be the midwives who delivered babies and maybe delivered them in such a way that if it wasn't for that person, that baby maybe would not be alive, right? Would not have survived. Or the people who, for example, during the war saved our ancestors in some way. So without whom the life wouldn't keep going in the lineage. They become the indirect ancestors. And it can also happen in a less dramatic way, where, for example, if you are in if the ancestors were in a relationship and then one of them stepped away and the other one went on to have another relationship and have children. So those children would not have been alive if it wasn't for the ancestor who stepped away. So they're not blood related, but their absence allowed the life to happen. So in that way, they also become an indirect ancestor. And in that way, for example, if they continue to hold a grudge towards their ex and whatever happens to them next, the life of those children of the ex is going to be a little bit entangled with that grudge, with that ongoing negativity that exists in this little system. And equally, if that ancestor is completely well-wishing towards their ex and their family, those children receive much more, energy flow, blessings towards their own life. They are freer to live their own life in a good way, at least in that aspect. So we have those indirect ancestors who are also with whom we also can be entangled and who also could be our resources. Then we have the place of in the past, that is our own life. So here we go systemic, here we go into our lineage, into our family system. Here we go into our own life. This is our childhood, and childhood is a big thing, right? We know now these days how much our childhood affects who we are today. That's why inner child work is super important and very powerful. As children, we are fully dependent. So we don't have as much agency, and the environment we're in and what we're taught and the relationships that we build will continue to affect us the rest of our life. So what happens to us in childhood creates our experience in the present and also potentially triggers everything that we hold as an inheritance from our lineage, right? So from epigenetics, we know that we inherit stuff, but then whether it gets activated in our own life or not is depends on our own environment. So sometimes we inherit things and they will be quiet, they will be sleeping for the whole of our life. They will never get triggered, and we potentially will never even know that that was part of us. But then with other things, something happens to us in this lifetime that triggers that inheritance, that triggers that pain point. So, for example, like with relationships, right? We are in a relationship, it breaks down, and seemingly simple, clean situation of two people separating because it didn't work out becomes something huge. And we don't know why we are in so much grief. We don't know why we are in so much pain because it doesn't feel proportionate to our own experience. So that's where we know that something bigger than us got triggered. And in that way, we also know that our own experiences in this lifetime could become the opportunities and the portals to heal and clear everything from the past. In some ways, our I don't want to say generation because it's also multi-generational, but kind of in our time right now, we are the best positioned generation compared to everyone before us to actually transmute, transform, and release the pain that we inherit. So if we imagine that this pain is rolling, for example, for 7 generations, you know, the pain of missing men in the lineage, that we can just look at the family tree and notice that after a particular age point, the man are just disappearing. They stay long enough in the lineage to pass life on, and then for whatever reasons, they disappear. And that happens generation after generation after generation after generation. And we are in a position better than anyone else before us to transform that, to heal that. Because, as I mentioned, because of all the opportunities that we have in this day and age for personal work, and it's normalized. So if before it was maybe frowned upon, or witchcraft and whatever else people used to call personal growth, personal development, personal work, now it's completely part of our culture. Maybe not in some places, maybe not in some contexts, but in a lot of contexts it's completely okay. And we have opportunities and we have tools to do it. So childhood previous relationships is what impacts us right now from our own past. And the collective more or less impacts everything. So I'm bringing it here in just one place, but actually we can look at it everywhere because the collective consciousness would have impacted our ancestors as well. And sometimes we think that actually it doesn't touch me at all. I'm not the collective, meaning what's happening with in the bigger picture, with the country, with town, with the world, the collective consciousness, the collective unfolding. We are part of it, whether we know it or not, whether we feel it or not. On some level, our energy fields all overlap and we create this bigger picture of the collective. And sometimes the flow of life will also bring to us bits and pieces of the collective entanglements. So, for example, I myself would not have anything to do with the history of Holocaust, but because of my ancestors and their connection to it, indirect connection, I will still be involved in it somehow. I will still touch on it. So when that field comes closer to me, it creates something big in me because there is something that is carried on from the past to me. So that could be our own life collective entanglements, and that could be our inherited collective entanglements. And in the present, so the present impact, in the present, what is being impacted is pretty much anything. A lot of the time, we don't have an understanding of how something in the past, not how, but what would be affected in the present by something in the past. Sometimes it's pretty clear, like an example with the missing man. For example, you can trace it in your family tree. You can see it, that it's happening, and then you realize, actually, I am part of that. I also experience this lack of a good, stable relationship or long-term relationship, the man that I find disappear. Or it could be in other ways where you see the, where it's easy to see the pattern of inherited pain points. So you would know that this thing that I'm sitting with in my life right now, actually I can see it happening back then, and that's clear. But a lot of the time, something that I'm sitting with right now has no obvious connection to something in the past. So we don't know how it works, that something in the past, how would it show up in the present? Sometimes it shows up in relationships. Sometimes it shows up mind, body, soul, when our physicality is affected, when our belief systems is affected, when we become something because of what was happening in the past, and that's pretty unconscious. Our relationships are impacted. The way we show up in relationships, the way we attach will be connected to our childhood, but also to the attachments in the past. Our purpose in terms of how we manifest in this lifetime, what we achieve in this lifetime, how big is our life. For example, if nobody in my lineage, if no women in my lineage were successful in creating a good career or creating a business or in some way finding self-fulfillment and professional satisfaction, then how am I supposed to do it? Or rather, maybe I will do it, but I will do it with a bit more difficulty because I don't hold it in me as a knowing in my bones that this is possible for a woman. The belief system and knowing in my bones that I will hold is that actually it's not possible for the woman. So maybe belonging to my lineage, belonging to my family system means that women stay at home, or that women are good mothers, or that something else, but it's not about the professional expression. So then I need to do a bit extra work, and maybe that's where the loyalty will be, the entanglement will be. How am I, how dare I be bigger than you? Build something bigger than you ever built. Be more successful, be more happy, be more healthy, be whatever else more than you ever was. And that's where if we work with this, that's where we want to go beyond that. So we want to go into those distant generations where we know all of this existed, because statistically it can't be nothing for all the generations. There will be generations where there would be everything. So we go there and we tap into the power, we tap into the resources, we tap into because that is also in us. We just forget about it. It's a bit less present because pain and suffering is always more present because it's more painful. If we take the analogy with our health, with our physical health, for as long as nothing goes wrong, we usually don't tend to think about it. And then something goes wrong and we, emergency, seek help now. And in the same way, when we feel the pain, we feel the pain and we want to do something about the pain. But we forget that there is also a way bigger field of strength and support and resources, the resources that help us. And all of that is then carrying the impact forward into the future of our life, so the rest of our life, and the future of further generations that will come after us. And in our life, for example, it could be way more than that. But for example, the rest, the rest of our life and how we continue to show up and what we achieve and what we become and what we feel and how much we feel, and do we live our life or do we run away from our life? All of that, the rest of our life, all of that is going to be impacted by the present moment and by everything that happened in the past. The good transition is basically our transition out of this lifetime, out of this physical body. A good transition could be a huge healing point for a lot of ancestors in the lineage. So a lot of the people before us did not have a privilege of a good death. It was not available to them. So if we manage to bring ourselves to a place of good death, of good transition, then we create this portal and this opportunity to imprint this knowing and experience into the whole lineage, and then it travels all directions into the past and into the future. Everything we do in the moment, everything we do for ourselves in terms of releasing, processing, letting go, spreads everywhere. It's like ripple effect. It goes into all directions, timelines, space lines, everywhere. And the becoming the ancestor, the impact of us in the now, everything we do, again, this ripple effect, right? It brings us either to a place of being a resourceful ancestor, like we're talking right now about looking back and connecting to the resources of our ancestors. We are becoming that. We are becoming somebody to whom the future can turn to and go, I need support. And you go, great, I am in a good place to do that. I've done this in my life. I know how to do it. I'm going to teach you. Energetically, that's what's happening. You're going to pass on that wisdom into the energy fields of everyone who comes after you. Or you become the one with whom they get entangled. So similar to how we entangle with our ancestors somewhere here, our loyalties, our places of pain that we can't overcome because we're connected to somebody in the past or that we inherit from them, we could become that for the future. All our unprocessed stuff could potentially become a pain point for somebody else in the future, right? Limit them, somehow block them, somehow impact them. And when we talk about the future, we talk about the future generations that are blood related and not blood related. For us to impact the future, we don't need to have children. Our impact happens irrespective of whether we are a blood ancestor or an indirect ancestor. Similar to how I mentioned about the ancestors, that there are non-blood related ancestors that facilitated life, and we could become entangled with them, or they could become our support. In the same way, we are becoming indirect ancestors to life in the future, whether we know it or not, whether we are conscious about it or not. Somewhere we pass the point in reality in such a way that it creates more life. either by being there or by not being there, in the example of being an ex-partner, right? Sometimes us not being there makes us an indirect ancestor as well, because that allows life to flow. Okay. So what is being passed on? The flow of life carries, as I mentioned, the entanglements and the resources. The entanglements come from points of pain in the past. And that pain could come from the global events, something big, some crisis like war or natural disasters or personal accidents. So real traumatic events and trauma, the official, sort of the formal definition of trauma is something, the event that is threatening to life. So there is a real threat to die that traumatizes us. And that trauma is not the actual event, but our response to it, and if it stays in the body. That's what they found. So for our ancestors who've been through those super traumatic events and were not able to let go of it, were not able to process it, it will stay in the body and it will be passed on to us in some way or form. The pain points like health and losses, physical health, and losses is a big thing. So in most of the work that we do systemically, it will be connected to some sort of losses in the past. And we talk about losses, say in relationships when we're losing loved ones. It could also be losses of properties. It could also be losses of land. So lots of migration, forced or willing in the past. And unlike now, when we are super connected with internet and quick transport, a lot of the time for our ancestors, moving would mean never seeing anyone again. So the impact of moving used to be massive. And sometimes, for example, that could mean that the heart of the person stays where they left with their family. So whatever life then they go on to create in a new place would be missing a bit of their heart that stayed back with their family. So then we have those generations of unavailable mothers, for example, because the mother who moved originally across continents, for example, she lost a bit of herself back. She didn't lose, she left it there with her parents, with her loved ones. And then to her daughter, to her granddaughter, there was already less to give. So that all creates entanglements, that all impacts us right now. The suffering, real or perceived, relates to, say, childhood adverse experiences, mental health, that historically a lot of the time would be something that people would not talk about. There will be a lot of shame about it. So it could be a very perceived suffering, internal experience that you will try to hide from everyone else. Socioeconomic conditions as well, and many other things, right? We're talking about suffering. It could show up in so many different ways. And one thing to mention is that often entanglements get created because of the secrecy around that pain and suffering. So when there was a secret where it was hidden, sometimes it would ask to be seen, or sometimes it wants to be acknowledged, or sometimes we unconsciously know that there is something else there that nobody sees, and we get to be the one who carries that somehow in our body. And then when we see it, acknowledge it, become grateful for it, its hold on us eases. So what we don't see takes a lot of energy. Secrets take a lot of energy. So when we see it, we don't have to know it. In this work, we don't have to know anything. We just need to energetically losing the connection. So we see it, we acknowledge it, we're grateful for it, then we can gently put it down. And then we have the resources. We inherit the resources. The flow of life brings us all of that also exists, as I mentioned, before us. Content, success, joy, happiness, love. When people were able to overcome some huge difficulties and build on top of that, so not survive but thrive. When people were able to, develop skills of building wealth or building careers, of building fulfillment or building incredibly loving relationship, or experience this kindness, experience the service to humanity, all of those things also get imprinted, also get passed on. So we receive them as well. So when we are in need of, okay, I want to do something more, support me. And we find the places that could support us. And in a lot of work, and specifically in systemic ritual work and in shamanic work, we would not go into any interventions around the entanglements before we resource the whole system. So a lot of work goes into resourcing, pumping the energy and strength and power into the whole lineage, so that then any pain points that exist, any entanglements that exist, are being able to be held in a much stronger way, so that whatever intervention is done, whatever healing is done, it lands in a very, like with good immune system. When we really invest into our body while it's healthy, into it being even stronger and healthier and sustainable, then when something goes wrong, the body is very easily bouncing back because it's in a good place. The immune system is strong. It's able to hold anything that sort of wobbles in a much better way. The same way the lineage. We also want to, in this resourceful place, we want to begin to build relationships with the ancestors who are well, with the ancestors who are holding those resources, because in that way we're also going to be inviting them to step in and to offer healing to the lineage, rather than us doing it because we are children in the lineage. We're inviting those who have power, those who were healers in the family, in the lineage, to step in and support those pain points, to step in and support those who are suffering. So that's what the flow is bringing to us. And then we'll look at the actual family system. And here I have 3 generations, right? So we are generation 1 and then 3 generations behind us, and there could be more. And here I only have the direct ancestors. So father, mother, their father, mother. And of course you could add more to that. The siblings, the aunts, uncles, children, all the children. And with the family system, the first thing to remember is that we are a child in our lineage. So as we saw from the first slide and the second slide, the first one is the flow of life goes from the past into the future. So we are in a position to receive from the past and to give to the future. So towards our ancestors, we are a child. We came last. They are big ones, we are small ones. And then towards the future, we become the ancestor. We become the big one, they become the small ones. We give, they receive. And then, of course, sometimes we choose what to give. And sometimes, if it's unconscious, if we received it from the past and haven't processed it, we also give to them everything else. Not only the stuff that we choose to give. So we know now that anything that happened to any of these people in our lineage could somehow impact us. We don't know in what way it will show up, but we know that it might show up, especially if trauma happened to people before puberty. So if our ancestors were children at the time of their pain point, their what they know now from this research in epigenetics is that the trauma affects our genes, our chemical composition, and then if it happens before puberty, when they grow up and they go on to have children, the children already receive the new composition, right? So everything that happened after the trauma and together with the trauma. So we want, when we sit with our family tree, when we create our family tree, we want to look at facts. What was happening? What do we know about that person's life? And when we know how the flow of life works and that we are impacted potentially by anything, those facts become not just facts about some person that we know that is like a legend, a story in the family. They potentially become information for us to inform what's happening in our own life. For us to suddenly realize, actually, if this happened, would it mean that what I'm going through right now could be somehow connected? So, for example, when I first had this family tree drawn for me, I was doing it with a woman who was into this work. And I asked her to explain to me what it looks like. So she was drawing my family tree based on information that I was telling her about what I know. And I knew at that point quite not a lot about my ancestors. And we came to my grandfather's place, and the legend in my family is about my grandfather, that when he was a kid, they were a big family, a very successful family, and within the time frame of about a month, he lost 45 of his siblings to some illness. His dad was persecuted and killed, and they had to flee the place where they were because of the persecutions. So when I told her this story, and it was a story, I mean, it gives me goosebumps now every time I talk about it. But at that time, I was just, it's a story in the family, when it's somewhere there, you don't even think about it. That was the story. And she said to me, okay, so do you think this family, the people who survived in that family, did they have time and space to mourn their dead? Were those children properly buried? Did they have proper ceremony around it? Did the grieving happen? And I sat there thinking, well, I have no idea. But if I just logically think about it, if they had to flee ASAP, I imagine probably not, because they would be very concerned with surviving themselves and kind of so that was the first time when it kind of hit me, that pain in my family. And at that time, I had no idea that it could be impacting me. I just felt that somewhere in my family there is a lot of pain. And I don't know whether it was processed, and I don't know whether, there was enough honoring happening towards it. So I started looking. That was the beginning of my all this journey, right? That was 14 years ago. I started looking for ways of ancestral healing to somehow offer some support to that place in my family. And I've historically done some very weird things with that as well. But then eventually I found family constellations and then shamanic work and then systemic ritual work and went on from that. And then recently I came to a point where I know that now there is enough honoring, there is enough healing that happened for that energy pain point in my family system to relax and for them to transition, for the whole system to breathe in and relax. And so when I think about it now, how would I be impacted by that pain point when I know what I know now? is that my grandfather was a child. He went through incredible pain of losing his siblings, of losing his father, of having to become the breadwinner for the family, of having to move and be somebody else until he was in his early 20s. He was still kind of pretending to be somebody else because they were hiding. So then everything he passed on to his children, everything he became, and then his children passed on to me, all of that is in me. All of that unprocessed grieving, all of that fear of persecution, all of that relationship with wealth that you could be persecuted for, all of that is in me. So that, I talk about it and I become really hot because it's, it's also my story. It becomes my energy. It becomes my bones. So my work in this lifetime not only releases and relaxes them, but it's also for me and for the future, so that it stops here and it doesn't need to keep going. So you look at facts and stories, and then one important thing to look at is exclusions. A lot of constellation work, a lot of systemic work will go to the place of exclusions. We'll work with exclusions first. So we'll look at who is forgotten in the family system. That could be aborted children, because for a long time it was also a point of shame. So nobody else will know about it. And if I don't know that there were aborted siblings, I think I'm number one in the family, as in my sibling order, but maybe I am number 3 or 4. And that changes my own energy of how I am in my generation. And sometimes you feel it quite physically, that I am not in my right place. Something's wrong. Or sometimes I can be entangled with those places of the unborn children. And I could be living 2 lives at the same time, because I'm trying to hold that place as well so that it's not forgotten. Because the family system will always look to fill in the empty places. It doesn't like to have empty places. For the family system, whoever entered the family system for however briefly has a place in that family system. So the exclusions create empty places, and the system will find future generations to fill them in. So aborted children, siblings that died young, siblings from previous generations of our parents, grandparents who disappeared, who something happened, people who, for example, committed something and were in prison, and because of the shame in the family, they would just be forgotten in the family, or mental health situations were institutionalized and also kind of point of shame and not talked about, or the ex-partners, significant ex-partners. So sometimes, there was an engagement and then it was ended, and to the later generations, nobody mentioned that there was another engagement before that. All of those things are potential exclusions, are potential entanglements. So as much as we can do consciously, because with some of them we will never find out. There is no way to find out unless we set it up in the constellation. But with some of them, it's possible. With some of them, it's just thinking a bit wider and thinking who is excluded. So this is kind of the primary work that we do with the family system. And this is just to summarize these different levels of consciousness that we mentioned already. The personal one that impacts us and impacts the future. The systemic, that is the past impacting us and impacting the future. The collective, that is sort of a bigger picture that impacts everything. And the universal is the one that goes beyond this timeline, beyond this physical body, beyond this lifetime. It's a way bigger container, right? It's the meta consciousness. And in family constellations, in systemic ritual, in meditations, in the work that I do, we work with all of this. So systemic is part of it always, the family system and the lineage, but we also go into past lives, into the collective trauma, and into the personal stories, especially inner child work. That's inner child work is the basis for healing for ourselves. There is so much that we hold from our childhood that creating this relationship with our child is paramount to anything else happening in our life. So the impact that we talked about before, it runs on all of these levels. We are impacted by all of these levels, and we create impact on all of these levels because we are all connected. So what do we do with this? We look at the flow of life, we look at the family system, we see pain points, we see what the flow of life is delivering to us. We may be very aware about what we are sitting with in our own life, or maybe we just see where it happens in the family system, and like in my case, having no idea how it could be impacting us. So in the case where everything is okay and you feel that life is good as it is, then there is no need to change anything. So you wouldn't do anything. You will continue as is. And it's like the analogy with physical health. When everything is good, you would just keep living your life and keep building your future. But when you feel that something is out of alignment and out of balance, then there are two ways, two approaches to it, the reaction and the prevention. So with the reaction is where usually this is where we do interventions, right? This is where we come to a family constellation and we say, this is what I'm sitting with. Something is not right, or something is very much wrong, and we want it different. So this is where we begin working with a lot of intention and with a lot of energy being put into it. So we look into becoming an issue holder in a family constellation, doing one-to-ones, doing the what I offer also is the intensive work, where we do all the work together for an extended period of time in a very intense way, so that we go to deeper layers of entanglements on all those personal, systemic, collective, universal levels. We seek systemic ritual as a issue holder when it's our own work. We go to therapy. We have so much therapy available right now. We just need to find the one that resonates with us, right? Whether it's somatic, whether it's psychodynamic, whether it's talking therapy, whether it's dancing therapy, whatever works for us. But we want the targeted approach towards what is not working in the moment. We do healing sessions. Again, we have so much access to a variety of healing modalities. As I mentioned, in our day and time, it's normalized and it's well researched, and we have access to so much of it, especially with online at the moment, right? When everything moved online, you just need to find your own person, the one that resonates with you. And the ancestral healing approach is beyond what I mentioned already, because there are a number of them. Again, you're doing your research and you find something that really speaks to you, and you follow that as an intervention. And in the prevention, it's you're looking at a bigger picture. So it's a more holistic approach to being the point in your lineage that sends healing ripples. So that's where you become conscious about becoming an ancestor. You become conscious about the family dynamics, and you begin building relationships around that. You begin building relationship with your well ancestors. You begin building relationship with your inner child. So you do the work not in an intervention way where you have to fix something, but you do it more in a holistic way where you are healing in a gentle way. So it's not necessarily something specific, it's more like a complex approach. So you do, for example, you do the representation in family constellations. You serve as representative, and in that way, you work on everything that you're holding, not on a specific thing, but standing as representative for various people in various constellations. You get to work on a whole spectrum of feelings that maybe are never accessible to you, but because you're standing in the field in a constellation, you suddenly feel them, and that's your opportunity to release for you and for everyone else behind you. You do the rituals as a way of, connecting to the field, connecting to your ancestors, dancing with your ancestors, not because you want to fix something, but because you want to be in that relationship, to feel their constant presence, to feel that you are belonging, restoring belonging in a very gentle way, finding your right place in your family system. And then the meditations is a very simple way of connecting to your ancestral field, where you don't need to go anywhere, you don't need to do anything. You sit in your own place with your eyes closed, and you allow this whole world to open up to you, and again you begin building relationships. So on my YouTube, there are meditations that do exactly that, that take you to your lineage, that take you to your ancestors, and you begin tapping into their energy, into their resources, just by opening your imagination, by opening your perception to their world and saying, I am your descendant. This is where I am, and I would like to connect. And I would like to know what you know. And I would like to feel what you feel in a good way, because the medicine that our ancestors held and practiced is in our bones. We just need to bring it to the surface, to activate it, to tap into it. Prayer, honoring, ceremonies, all of that is also supporting building the relationship. Lifestyle changes where you intentionally spend more time in nature, connecting to the more than human ancestors, to the planet, to the bigger universal consciousness of where we exist as human, as one species of all other species. And shamanic practice, inner child work, as those that again help you build a relationship with yourself and with wider systems around us, so that when we do the work in that way, in a preventive way, in a lifestyle changing way, in a relationship building way, we take care of, for example, of the exclusions naturally, because as part of the practice is including everyone. When we do the prayers for the whole lineage, when we sit with the family tree represented in a ritual, and we just sit with it and we sing for it, or we pray for it, or we read a poem for it, or we just spend time with them in the sunshine, we are re-including people who are excluded. We're doing the healing without knowing that we're doing the healing. Okay, so these are the three approaches to how to begin, or how to continue, or how to deepen the work that we do with family systems. And on this note, I'm going to leave to end this class. And if you have any questions for me, I am happy to answer anything.
Hey, Alexandra, thank you so much.